Welcome to a special Pollinator Week Beekeeping Today podcast. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey guys! Global Patties is proud to sponsor this special Pollinator Week of Beekeeping Today podcasts. Global Patties is a family-run business that has been operating for over 17 years. They manufacture protein supplement patties for honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties made with a time-tested recipe of natural ingredients, with or without real pollen, and they also make custom patties to meet specific requests. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Global invented and made popular the sandwich patty design, which simplifies the handling process for beekeepers. Keep your bees going strong all summer long by supplementing with Global Patties. You can find out more at their website, www.globalpatties.com.
Yep, we want to definitely thank Global Patties for sponsoring this Pollinator Week series. And Kim, today we're pretty lucky to get Gene Brandi on the show. I know I've met Gene many years ago when he was chair of the National Honey Board, and Sherry was working there. So I'm looking forward to talking to him and getting caught up to find out what's going on the West Coast these days.
Yeah, he's got his fingers in a lot of things going on out there. He's still active in the Beekeeping Federation group. He and I spent a day at the California Honey Day here just a couple of months ago. Kind of reliving old times and talking about catching up with what's new. And he's a honey producer, a big-time honey producer, but he's also a pollinator. And that's, of course, our interest. Some of our interest today, anyway, is West Coast pollinator, kind of as compared to the East Coast pollinator we did with Davey.
Yeah. Well, and top of all that, I found that he's a real nice guy. So I'm looking forward to talk to him. Let's call him up on Zoom right now.
Okay.
Well, welcome, Gene, to Beekeeping Today podcast during Pollinator Week.
Thank you.
Hi, Gene. This is Kim. It's been not too long since you and I spent some time together. We were at that festival out in your neck of the woods about a month or so ago. Sat for a day and talked to a lot of people about bees and beekeeping. So it's nice to get back together again. For those of you listening, I want to introduce Gene Brandi, who's the co-president of Gene Brandi Apiaries with his wife, Christine. Gene lives in the Central Valley of California. He has been the past president of the American Beekeeping Federation, the past chairman of the National Honey Board, and has a large and diverse beekeeping business where he is. He produces honey, he pollinates crops, he does a lot of other things. And Gene, I'm going to get out of your way and let you tell us and our listeners a lot more about what you've got going out there, especially the pollination part, but all of the other things combined.
Thank you, Kim, and really appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today during Pollinator Week. We've got a business here in Central California, headquartered in Los Banos. And I've been operating out of Los Banos here since 1978, and we've always endeavored to make honey, and as well as pollinate the crops that we are paid to pollinate. But the honey is really variable, much of it depending upon the rainfall that we get here in California. And in recent years, especially the last 10, 12 years, pollination has surpassed our honey income. The pollination income has surpassed our honey income, and especially in the drought years. But nonetheless, we do endeavor to make honey as much as we can. It does help the bees. The bees are healthier. It's healthier to make more honey and healthier to pollinate crops when we do have the natural forage that's here in California when we get rain. But certainly we pollinate almonds, as do most commercial beekeepers in the USA. Living right here in the Central Valley, where there are well over 1 million acres of bearing almonds and well over 1.3 million acres of almonds in the ground, including the non-bearing acreage. So it is certainly the largest honeybee pollination event in the world every February and March, and we're living right here in the middle of it.
Gee, just a quick question to kind of give listeners a scope. What kind of numbers of colonies are you working with on average?
Okay, my son, I failed to mention, but my son Michael is also in the business with me now. He has been for a little over 15 years. And between Michael and I, we run a couple thousand colonies of our own. And every year Michael gets a few more and I get a few less. So that's part of his bonus and part of my retirement strategy, or I guess that is my retirement strategy. But in addition to that, we also lease bees for almond pollination from other beekeepers, some of whom are from out of state. And so we basically double the size of our operation during February and March every year, where we're running these bees belonging to others for almonds, and we manage them when they're here, just as if they're our own. We go through every hive and check them for queen rightness and for feed. Had to use a lot of feed this year, and of course just grading them for strength. And so we basically double our operation every February and March. Wow. As far as colonies. So that's part of what we've been doing for the last 12, 14 years now. And with the increase in demand for almond pollination, and not really wanting to grow our own operation that much, because we have to take care of them or find forage for them the rest of the year, which is often difficult, especially during drought times, we've chosen to lease bees from others just for the pollination. We get a percentage of the fee, and it's been working well for us. So we're going to continue to do that.
You bring up a couple of interesting parts of this, Gene, and one of them is with during the almond season, you're working with about 4,000 colonies. How many landowners are you dealing with on all of that? How many pollination contracts? How many? I would guess that it gets just a little crazy.
First of all, let me correct you a little bit on the numbers. We don't quite have 4,000 in February and March because of winter die-off. So we've got a little less than that, depending upon the year, certainly. But we do work with probably, really, we're down to about 8 or 9 growers right now, and some of them are fairly large. And they're people that I've known for years. I've tried to maintain these relationships, and I have maintained them. And once you get a good relationship with the grower, and we like the grower, and the grower likes us, and we want to maintain that relationship and provide them good service. And that's another reason that we've included the rental of bees from other beekeepers, because we're trying to keep up with the demand from our own growers that we've had the relationships with for years, and they keep on planting more trees. So they're all part of the gold rush, if you will, to cash in on almonds while they're still profitable.
Well, it sounds like it's working out with that number of growers. 8 or 9 seems to be a reasonable number. Still, probably you're juggling once in a while. But the other part that you brought up is the rest of the year. You're talking February and March and almonds, and at least 10 months. You mentioned honey production. What kind of other crops are you working with to make honey? Well, we endeavor to make honey whenever we can. And in a year like this, when we've had above normal rain in our part of California where we keep bees, and it's basically Central California here, within about 150 miles of Los Banos, where I live, we take bees to wildland and native areas where we made some sage honey this year. That's a native California plant. The bees have also been working on some deerbush or wild alfalfa, depending upon your description of the plant. And then toyon is starting to come in right now, which is a native California plant. It's also called California holly, by the way. And that's where the term Hollywood came from, because those hills between the San Fernando Valley and Los Angeles are covered with toyon, or California holly. So that's where the term Hollywood originated. Makes a
a lot of honey in the good years. It's terrible tasting honey, but nonetheless, the bees do well on it, and there's a really nice nutritious pollen that comes along with that nectar. So it's a great plant for the bees. And then once the toyon is finished, then we'll move the bees back to the valley here, the Central Valley, because it's just about time to start doing that. Because usually by about the 4th of July, the cotton starts blooming, and cotton is the number one honey plant in the Central Valley in the summertime. Acreage has shrunk considerably from what it used to be, but nonetheless, it's still significant for nectar flow. We can also make honey from alfalfa if the growers let the hay bloom, or if we happen to pollinate seed alfalfa. And then, of course, we're pollinating melons in the summertime, too. And generally, there is cotton or alfalfa in the vicinity of where we have the bees and melon pollination. So that's our summertime honey. The other types of honey that we can make, Kim, would be in the springtime. We can make some eucalyptus honey in coastal areas, a little different than the sage country, but nonetheless, we have customers that really like eucalyptus honey, and it's a unique flavor. I kind of think it tastes like medicine myself. It's not one of my favorites, but some people really love it. So sage, wild alfalfa, toyon, eucalyptus, and then summertime would be the cotton alfalfa mix. And in a good year, we can have maybe some tarweed or blue curl in the fall or late summer and fall. So that's a general mix of honeys in a good year, and it appears that this at least is starting out to be one of those good years. So we're thankful.
That's really good.
Well, keep your fingers crossed. Certainly, I know cotton can be a temperamental crop for beekeepers and bees, at least in some parts of the country. Do you run into spray issues with cotton out there?
Pesticides go hand in hand with cotton, and yes, we're always very. We try to remain conscious of what's going on, what they're applying to the cotton. We register our hives with the local county ag commissioner out here in California, and the applicators are supposed to let us know of any product intended to be applied to blooming plants of any kind within 1 mile of our spot. So let's say we've got 20, 25 locations in the summertime, and they're all registered. Well, obviously we get calls every day. The last 2.5, 3 months has been a little bit of a relief, because with all of our bees out of the valley over in Sage Country, we canceled all of our registrations. But here in another week, 10 days, when we start bringing bees back to the valley for summertime, we'll re-register the locations, and we'll get our daily calls from a myriad of applicators. And so the pest control advisors who advise the growers what to spray are a big part of the whole picture here, because if they can recommend products that are short-lived and not long residual products, but something that can be applied at night, and the bees can come out in the morning and there's very little or none of it left as residue, that's the way we can survive. And indeed, that's how we are able to survive here in the valley, is with the shorter residual compounds. Now, that being said, there are some longer residual products that are sometimes used on cotton, and we need to try to avoid that as much as possible. We may even have to move locations. If we're in a pollination situation, if we're sitting in a melon field, for example, we cannot move until the grower says it's time to go. So oftentimes the grower or the grower's PCA will talk to the cotton grower's PCA and see if they can change materials to something that's more, something on the shorter residual side that we can live with, and that's not going to be detrimental to the bees. Nonetheless, if we're around cotton, we're going to get some damage. It's just expected that when we bring bees back to the valley in the summertime, we're going to get some pesticide damage sooner or later. That's the way it's been for over 40 years, and I anticipate it's probably not going to change.
When you say PCA, who is PCA?
I'm sorry. PCA is a pest control advisor. We've got certified pest control advisors here in California that are licensed, and they are the only ones who can recommend pesticide use on crops, and whether the pesticides or the pesticide applicators, some of the applicators are also PCAs, but most of the PCAs work independently from the applicators. So, and some of the applicators are the actual farmers. So, so we have certified pest control advisors. We have custom applicators. Some of them are ground applicators. Some are aerial applicators, and then there are the growers who will apply. Some growers will apply some products themselves.
Is that system working out pretty well then?
You know, it's better than no system. Mm-hmm. This has been the system in California since I got involved with working bees here in the mid-'70s, and it's not perfect, but it does open the lines of communication between the beekeeper and the applicators, and sometimes the grower. And it's not perfect because sometimes they're using products that there's no way we can be around at all, and yet we can't move. Yeah. And so there's a dilemma there. But for the most part, I would say that pest control advisors in this valley are very cognizant of the fact that there are bees here, and not just during almond time, but throughout the year, and they're aware of the fact that bees killed in the summertime aren't going to be as good, or might not be there at all, come the next February when it's time to pollinate almonds. And most of these PCAs who are advising growers on what to spray on their cotton or their alfalfa or their melons or corn or whatever they have in the summertime are also growers that have almonds. And so they know that the value of the bees to the almond grower in February. So they're, for the most part, they're very cognizant of the value of bees.
Do you get, I'm just sitting here listening to this and wondering if you get or know of communications between growers. If you're sitting on melons and there's cotton close enough that your bees are going to be over there at some point in time during that melon pollination event, do you get a melon guy who's going to talk to the cotton guy and say, I got bees over here, and if you zap those bees, I'm not going to get melons, and do you see any of that kind of cooperation or friction or interactions?
I've seen all of the above. I've seen a lot of good cooperation. And I've seen friction, and I've seen obstinance where I'm going to spray this. It's my crop, and heck with the bees. But that's more of a rare situation today. Much more rare today than it used to be. Like I say, the system is not perfect, but I think that with the registration and communication system we have, and with the general acceptance that bees are a benefit to the ag community, that there is a lot more cooperation today than there used to be.
Well, that's certainly an improvement. There were times back when I was first starting in this business where it was a no man's land out there a lot of times, and the beekeeper often, not always, but often ended up on the short end of that kind of confrontation. One of the things go ahead.
You're right, Ken. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there are certain situations that as a beekeeper I have shied away from. And one example is alfalfa seed. I used to pollinate alfalfa seed. I did that for over 25 years, and I gave it up here about 10 years or so ago. The first year I lost 45% of my hives over the winter. I said, I'm going to be doing some different things. I'm going to change some of my practices here. One of the things I did was I gave up alfalfa seed pollination, because that was a pollination where it wasn't a matter of if you were going to get some pesticide damage. It's a matter of how bad is it going to be this year. And it was always a situation, even under the best circumstances, and all the applications were done at night. They're trying their best to save bees, but under the best circumstances, you're going to lose bees, and it's just a matter of how bad it's going to be. So I've decided to no longer pollinate alfalfa seed. I haven't done it for, like I say, for about 10 years now. So but there are still beekeepers pollinating alfalfa seed. I mean, they still get honeybees, and they also, the growers will rent or buy leafcutter bees as well. And of course, those bees are also susceptible to pesticide exposure and damage. And it's a situation where I've chosen to just steer clear of that now.
Well, I wonder if being a beekeeper, then I'm looking at that as a crop. It's a viable crop. It's an income. It's a pollination fee. I know I'm going to lose 40% of my bees, so I'm going to increase my fee a certain amount to accommodate that loss. Is that kind of thing just built into the equation?
Summertime pollination fees here in the valley are much lower than almonds. Like this last year in almonds, the average price was probably $190 to $200, and obviously there were people that received more than $200 a colony. In contrast, our summertime pollinations here in the valley for melons or alfalfa seed are going to be somewhere between like $35 and $60 or so, just depending upon the crop. So it's strictly a supply and demand. And I mean, almond pollination is supply and demand as well. But there are more bees here in the summertime than there is demand for summertime crop pollination. That's why the fees or the pollination fees are much lower. So if a beekeeper wants to charge more because of the chance of pesticide loss in alfalfa seed, you can maybe do that up to a point, and then the grower is going to look for someone else who will come in for less, because chances are he'll be able to find someone to come in for less.
Well, that's a tough decision to have to work with as a beekeeper, as a pollinator, knowing that I'm going to take a hit no matter what, and I don't have a lot of leverage on price. It's real obvious why you chose to move, but other beekeepers that are sitting out there without those kinds of opportunities, that's a tough road to hoe. And I'm impressed that even people keep doing it, and that alfalfa growers, I'm sure that you've got to protect the seed, you got to protect the crop, but not an easy choice on any side of that equation.
Yeah, you're right, Kim. And the one of the magnets, I guess, that tends to draw beekeepers to alfalfa seed, that it drew me as well, is that's the only crop that I ever pollinated where I could be paid for pollination and make honey at the same time. Now, as I say that, I mean, the honey would generally come in early in the bloom, and then once the bees have been beat down by the pesticides and the hives are weaker, well, then there's not going to be much honey to be made. But we could make a couple supers or more of alfalfa honey in a lot of years, before they got sprayed. So that was kind of nice to be able to make some nice white alfalfa honey. And there's also cotton in the area too, so the bees would work cotton, because cotton is also a white honey. But the end result is, if a beekeeper is getting damaged to where a high percentage are not going to be able to survive the winter and be there in February for almond pollination, well, is that really worth it? And so that's why I chose to do what I did.
Well, one of the things you brought up, and actually only one of many things you just brought up, but one of them is honey production. And as you're probably aware, the USDA National Honey Report came out just a couple of weeks ago, and I'm looking at the numbers here. California does a good job. Every year for the last at least 10 years, you've been in the top 10 honey-producing states. So you must be doing something right out there in terms of drought or no drought, pesticides or no pesticides, all of the things going on for you out there. You guys make a lot of honey.
Yes, and obviously North Dakota has been the king here for the last several years. But I mean, I've been doing this long enough to remember when we were number one for many years back in the 80s and 90s. And I'm not sure if we'll ever get there again. But and part of that, Kim, is the change in the landscape here in the Central Valley because of almonds. Well, it's because of almonds and because of lack of irrigation water, or very severely restricted irrigation water. And there's one area in particular I'm thinking about. It's about 30 miles south of where I live here, where it used to be great cotton country. It's on the west side of the valley. The growers get their water from the California aqueduct. It happens to be that area that's been severely restricted in recent years because of the Delta smelt issues. And there's a couple of years, 2015 and 2016, where they got zero water allotment from the California aqueduct. And so basically that country is no longer cotton country. And I used to pull honey. I'd be pulling cotton honey in September or late September, even early October some years in that country, and that doesn't exist anymore. There are almond trees down there now, some of which are coming out because of the water situation, but the landscape has changed because of almonds. And even right here around Los Banos, where we have a water district that is not connected to the California aqueduct. It's an old riparian district that emanates from the San Joaquin River. This district was formed back in the 1880s. And so the water, irrigation water is more reliable here. And in the years when the people irrigating off the aqueduct got 0% in 2015 and 2016 because of the drought, we got 75% in this little water district right here around Los Banos. So what's happened is that a lot of this ground that has historically been cotton, melons, tomatoes, corn, the field crops, has been now converted to almonds. And we don't have the best almond ground right here. We have some high water table areas. We got some alkalinity issues with the soil, but the water is more readily available. It's more reliable. And so just locally here, within 10 miles of where I live, we've probably got, probably 8 or 10 times the almonds we had 15 years ago, just because of water. So things are shifting. But as the almond acreage increases and the cropping patterns change, well, there is generally less for the bees to work in the summertime. And so that is an issue for us here in the Central Valley.
Every day you're looking at something affected by almonds one way or another, I guess. And I guess with as much of land devoted to those, that makes perfect sense. But dancing around all of that and then having it continually evolve must, I'm not going to say it'll keep me awake at night, but I guess you're probably used to it more than a lot of us. But water certainly is one of the issues that you're dealing with as a pollinator out there because of the changing landscape and the changing crop availability. What's from where you sit? How much? I guess the question is, how much advance information do you have from your growers, from the government on okay, what can I expect this season when it comes to water availability affecting crop availability?
As far as almonds are concerned, the acreage, like I say, has been shifting. It's been shifting away from the marginal water areas into areas where the water is more reliable. But just to give you an example, in 2015 and 2016, when growers on the west side of the San Joaquin Valley who irrigate off the California aqueduct received zero allotment. I mean, they still, the ones that had the money still got water, but they had to pay someone with a well or someone that had water from a water district that was eligible to transfer that water into the aqueduct from another district further up the line. Water that growers would normally pay $175 or $200 an acre foot for, they were paying $1,500 to $2,000 an acre foot during those drought years just to keep their trees alive and hopefully to be able to get the crop off too. But a lot of them were just deficit irrigating just to keep the trees alive so they could save their orchards. Now, a lot of those orchards that were treated in that fashion and deficit irrigated have now been pulled out because that really does affect the long-term viability of the trees. So that's not a good long-term solution. But as far as water availability this year, we've got tremendous rainfall in most of California. Certainly The snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains is the water in the bank, if you will, for the summertime irrigation here. Whatever water district you're in, the snowpack is going to impact that the availability of water in the summertime. And there were places in the Sierra Nevada this year that accumulated over 40 feet of snow this last winter. I mean, in total. Like up at Mammoth Mountain and different places up in the High Sierra. I mean, 40 feet. But that's just, I mean, it's one of the top 15 years since they've been keeping records, okay? Now, that being said, the farmers on the west side of the valley irrigating off the aqueduct, the ones that got 0% in 2015 and 16, they're not getting full allotment this year. They were talking about it on the Ag News this morning, and they're getting 75% of their allotment. And if they can't get 100% on a year like this, they're never going to get it. It's a lot of it's politics. The fish in the Delta, where the aqueduct emanates, it's still a major environmental issue, and they're still concerned about the fish in the Delta. But my gosh, I mean, every river is running, bank to bank. There's a little bit of flooding going on. Not certain. It's not like the Midwest had here earlier this year, or maybe still occurring. But nonetheless, there is some flooding because the rivers are running so high, and yet the growers on the west side can't get enough water to even get more than 75% of their allotment. So it's bizarre. It's bizarre. So that being said, water districts like the one where we live here in Los Banos, we've got 100%, and most water districts in the state have full allotments except the west side where the growers irrigate off the aqueduct. That's the one where it's been a problem, and I think the problems are going to remain. So there are fewer and fewer trees there. There are less almonds there than there was 10 years ago, and I anticipate that the acreage is not going to be expanding there as much as other parts of the state where the water is more available and reliable.
You had mentioned that you keep pretty much a 150-mile radius of your home there. Do you not transport bees up to any other place in the country, or are you pretty much just localized there in Central California?
I am localized here in Central California. During those drought years, I was wondering if perhaps I shouldn't look for greener pastures. But no, I've got a lot of friends who keep bees out of state. My own brother has been taking bees to North Dakota since 1981. And has been successful. Of course, Midwest is like dryland farming. As you know, you can have great years or not so great years depending upon the weather. And it is a totally different lifestyle. It's worked for my brother. He's got a set up in North Dakota where he's bought land, built a warehouse, and bought houses, and has a crew of H2A workers that go up there and help him every summer. But that's the business model and the lifestyle he's chosen. Where I've chosen to stay here, and it's obviously worked for over 40 years for me here. But not to say that there hasn't been challenges, especially in these drought years. But nonetheless, being right here in the middle of almond country where we live, it's a benefit. Although I said years ago, and I still say it, that the increase in demand for bees to pollinate almonds is the best thing and the worst thing that's ever happened to California beekeeping. And as I say that, it's wonderful to have, abundant almond acreage close by where I can rent all my bees without having to travel very far. I mean, my furthest almond orchards are about 30 miles from home, and most are much closer than that. But nonetheless, the fact that about 90% or so of the nation's available managed commercial beehives, they got to deduct the dead ones from the total that the USDA gives you, because we're talking February, so those winter losses are fully manifest at that time. So about 90% of the available managed commercial beehives in the entire USA are here in our valley. It creates challenges. I mean, we've got crowding issues, we've got mite and disease spread issues, that type of thing. The crowding is not in the almonds. It's before and after the almonds, where we've got big holding yards near locations that we've had for a long, long time, and suddenly we've got company there. Hey, there's a semi-load of bees sitting down the road, and that part of it has been a challenge for we beekeepers that have been keeping bees in California for a long time, because we knew how it was before this all happened.
Well, it's a great contrast to our podcast with Davey Hackenberg the other day, where he's constantly on the road and he's constantly fixing trucks and constantly dealing with border issues between states and everything else. And so it's nice to see the difference where you're able to pretty much, at least during that season, keep within 30 miles of home, and 150 throughout the rest of the season. It's different set of issues.
Yeah, absolutely, and I sympathize with those people that have to deal with border issues. I mean, my brother's been doing it for nearly 40 years, and of course the people that we deal with, and a lot of our friends too that are going out of state with their bees. It's just sometimes it can be horrendous. But we move our hives about 6 times a year. So some people that talk to me say, "Well, you're non-migratory." Well, hey, some of our hives get almost 1,000 miles a year on them by the time, especially a year like this, when we will go down the 150, come back to 150, and maybe move around the valley here for a while and take them back to that same country if there's blue curl and tarweed later. And so we're moving some of our hives. On average, we move about 5 or 6 times a year. So we're on the road a lot, but it's about 3 hours is the longest drive we have. So we're not talking about cross country, obviously, but nonetheless, I spent a lot of nights in my truck over the years, and I try to do it. I try to do it less and less all the time, but somehow it seems like some of these loads I get them. I still the other night, Monday night, I was down south. I spent the night in the motel and moving bees from one area down there to another area. And then we pulled honey. We pulled about 500 supers of honey yesterday and came home.
One of the two things. One, I want to make a comment is that you can leave home and drive 4 hours, and you're still in California. And Davey leaves home, and in 4 hours, he's gone through 6 states out east.
Yes, I hear you.
But one of the issues that we back here were hearing about last almond season was theft, beehive theft.
Yeah.
Did you run into any of that?
I've been really fortunate in recent years. I've not had any theft problems, but I first got on the state beekeepers board of directors in 1977. And in November of 77, when I first got on the board, the CSBA board decided that they were going to institute a reward program. And that would be for information leading to the apprehension, arrest, and conviction of those persons involved in theft or molestation of beehives. So it's been a problem since at least the 70s, and it's been growing a little bit as the demand for bees and almonds increases. And now that we're, as I mentioned, the almond rates this year were in the area of $200 or maybe at least $190. And so it's very attractive for someone who is, of the mindset that it's easier to steal something than to actually do it yourself, to just steal 100 beehives or in some cases steal a semi-load of beehives and rent them to a grower. So I've not had the personal experience in the last, I guess it's probably been 15 years since I had anything stolen, but I have friends who've lost bees just this past year. And in some cases, some of these folks experienced high winter mortality, and one friend of mine said it was the best load of bees we had, and now it's gone. And they were looking to not only obviously pollinate almonds with that load, but then split it later to help make up some of their dead outs. And I haven't talked to them about it recently, but I don't believe they ever found it. There was a fella here a couple of years ago. Actually, it was more than one person. It was, I think, a team of people that were caught with nearly $1 million worth of stolen bee equipment in their possession. And that was a big theft ring. So that maybe, I don't know what percentage of the thefts that was. That occurred over a number of years. It wasn't all from 1 year, but anyway, that was one ring. Apparently, there was someone down in Kern County, down around Bakersfield here, about 3 or 4 years ago, who had like a chop shop going where they were stealing bee equipment and then chiseling out brands or grinding off brands and repainting the equipment and making it look new and different. There have been people that have been arrested and convicted, but it's something that I guess we're always on the lookout for. But I guess if it happens to you, it's a disaster. It's terrible if it happens to someone else, but if it happens to you, it's a disaster. So, and I've checked out, insurance, and it is possible to insure for bee theft, but the insurance is very, very expensive. So most beekeepers don't have it. And the CSBA reward program is still in effect. It's a $10,000 maximum reward, for the information leading to the apprehension, arrest, and conviction of people, that are either molesting or stealing beehives. And we had a couple of fellas that actually caught a bee thief here a couple of years ago, or I guess it's been like maybe 3 years ago now. We've got the posters, we put the posters out on the yards, and especially around almond time. And hopefully that's a deterrent. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But nonetheless, as the value of the bees increases for almond pollination, I think there's always going to be some of that. And it's not super widespread, but again, if it happens to you, it's a disaster.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's big enough that it's making the news back here. So, that's kind of why I brought it up. So you've got pollination season, you've got honey season, and you've got the rest of the season. And one of the questions always is, where do you put your bees in the rest of the time? What's available? Where do you go?
It certainly depends upon how much rainfall we've received. And what I've done is I've developed relationships with landowners throughout the central part of the state, over the past 40 years. And we pay the rent for the land. And the rent is generally, for most of them, it's honey, plenty of honey. And since we do raise a lot of melons here in the summertime, I distribute cantaloupes or watermelons to the growers as well in the summertime. And then in the wintertime, I get a hold of some of that sous vide honey barbecue sauce I get from my brother. I'm not in sous vide myself, but my brother is. And so I get a part of a pallet of sous vide barbecue sauce. So they get honey and honey barbecue sauce. And that's the rent. But we do this every year. They get paid at least twice a year, every year, whether we use the ranch or not. And some of these ranches, like during the 5-year drought, we didn't use them at all. But nonetheless, we maintain the relationship. So what we do, like after almonds, we immediately take the first hives from almonds directly over the hill west of Los Banos to the eastern Monterey Bay area. And of course, some of those are in berries. I didn't mention that, but we also do a little bit of berry pollination over there, basically raspberries. There's a few blackberries, but mainly raspberries. And so we move bees over there for berries. And that's also the eucalyptus country where the bees can build up and we can make our splits and everything over there. And this can be done anywhere, actually, in coastal California, where there's eucalyptus trees, which is a good deal of the coastal California. But that's where we go. And then we move further south if it's a wet year like this for sage and the wild alfalfa and the toyon. And we bring the bees back to the valley. Generally, the coastal areas don't do much in the middle of summer. I do have 2 locations I'm going to try this year. I've done this occasionally in the past where there's a yellow star thistle and some buckwheat. And I'm going to try to see if I can keep those hives over there all summer long and see how it goes. And they will be able to avoid the cotton pesticide exposure. But the rest of the bees will be coming back to the valley, many of them in melon pollination, but some will just be out in some of the duck clubs and the wildland areas around here where they can still reach cultivated crops, but they won't be sitting right next to a cotton field or right next to an alfalfa field or some area where they're going to get sprayed, but they can certainly reach it and be potentially exposed. But nonetheless, we register those locations, and so we're notified. They're supposed to be notified of what's happening there. When the summertime is waning in the late August, early September, we will again move out to some of these ranches, either in the Sierra foothills or the coastal areas if there's blue curl and tarweed. That's our two main late summer and fall plants that we always hope to have, because they both provide some good pollen, number one, and occasionally some nectar. If they make a little honey, that's fine. It's good bee feed. But the main thing is we're looking for that good pollen, because good fall pollen is it's almost irreplaceable. I don't care how many pollen or protein patties you put on the hives. It's not as good as having some good pollen, especially blue curl. Blue curl seems to be one of the most nutritious pollens that bees can get. I mean, it's one of the best. So we certainly like to be around blue curl if it's available.
It sounds like you've got, I use this term carefully, but it sounds like almost like you're sitting in the middle of the land of milk and honey out there, Gene. Certainly some issues, but I'm envious of what the resources you have available, and it sounds like a great place to keep bees. We are running right up short to be out of time, but Gene, I really want to get you back on this show to talk about the other part of your business, which of course is the honey production and all of the things that go into that. You've touched on it here, but we want to get you back on and talk a little bit more about that. Will that work for you sometime soon?
Yeah, I think that would work for me. And as far as things being great in the land of milk and honey, it's so much better when it rains, Jim, because those drought years where we didn't go to a lot of these ranches where we are today, it's way different than it is when we have adequate rain like we've had this year.
Well, I'll tell you about adequate rain, Gene. We've got a forecast this morning for 3.45 inches in the next 2 days. I would more than happy to share that with you if we could, but unfortunately, I'm just going to have to get out my pontoons to make it to the garden. So, Gene,
okay, get those rubber boots on.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this as part of Pollinator Week, and I know our listeners are glad to be able to get this view, because this is one we don't get very often. So thanks again for being with us, and I look forward to having you back again. And take care and good luck the rest of the season.
Thanks, and appreciate the opportunity.
It's good having you on the show. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Take care.
Well, Kim, that was great to have Gene on the show. I hadn't... back when I was going to all the American Beekeeping Federation meetings and honey board meetings with Sherry, hadn't seen or talked to him since those days. So it's fun to kind of reconnect with him. He's a busy guy. Yeah,
he is, and I think we're lucky to have him on during Pollinator Week, because he is. We tried to cover a lot of bases this week of industries and people that are associated with Pollinator Week, and he's certainly an interesting piece of the puzzle, much different than Davey out on the East Coast, certainly, and I hope gave people a picture of two sides of this coin, and how much different it is between the coasts when you have to go to the coast to pollinate almonds as opposed to having them 30 miles down the road. Yeah. It's a much different way to keep bees, and I hope people saw that. I enjoyed the part about pesticides and the communications going between growers and PCAs, and California is the only place that has that, and issues that arise certainly are better than they are in a lot of other places where you don't have that kind of communication. So Gene opened up a lot of windows for us, and I think it was good to see how things work out there. I'm envious of his weather and his honey crops, and not with his drought. So it was good to see a little bit of both.
I thought it was fascinating, and I hadn't considered this, but I found it fascinating where he talked about being a local guy and being really 150 miles center of his home, where he does all the pollination and almond orchards and everything. And he's seen it from a perspective of all the beekeepers coming into his state, into his home turf, and he didn't say turf, but into his locales, and having to deal with, I imagine, just bumping shoulders with everybody as they're trying to get their bees out on the almonds, and then they all leave, and he's still there working away. And I think we're so used to hearing how 90% of the nation's bees go to California in January, February, and really never get the perspective or get to see the perspective of the person who's sitting there before and afterwards. So I found it very, very fun, very fascinating.
It must be kind of you kind of wonder what these guys out there, when they get together behind closed doors, that they're talking about all this stuff coming into the state again. and wonder what they're going to bring with them this year, or what they're going to leave behind. But it was an interesting view, and I'm jealous of his honey production. California in the top 10 every year. Good almond or good pollination business, good honey business, and not a bad place to live.
Yeah, if I was to have to decide, I'd probably, and no offense to any of the migratory beekeepers who travel thousands and thousands of miles each season, I think I'd like the idea of just being able to drive 30 miles down the road and drop a load of bees and call that good for my pollination contract and move them 6 miles the other direction for another contract, as opposed to going from Florida to Georgia to Maine. Yeah. Yep. My gosh.
He's one of the few people that are in this business that I know that for the most part get to eat breakfast and supper at home.
There's a lot to be said for that. Well, that about wraps it up for this podcast. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. We want to thank this Pollinator Week sponsor, Global Patties. Global Patties has been manufacturing protein supplements for honeybees for over 17 years. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. And while you're there, give them a shout out for sponsoring this great program with Gene Brandi from Gene Brandi Apiaries. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show and joining us all week long. Feel free to send us comments and questions to questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. And tomorrow we have Adam Ellington from Bloomberg Environmental, who has a podcast series on the business of bees. So he really does provide a good outsider perspective on the bee business. So make sure you catch that podcast. Anything else you want to add, Kim?
Well, I think that does it for today, Jeff. I got to go out and try and find where I'm going to go plant some of my pollinator gardens this year, and I think it's underwater, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, you're doing aquaculture, aren't you? Plant them lilies quickly. All right. Thanks a lot, Kim. I'll talk to you later.
All right, Jeff. Take it easy. Thanks.
Bye-bye.